This is where I've talked about we need that little elevator music.
Yes.
Just for, yeah.
Why don't they have that feature?
I could sing to you guys.
Oh yeah, there you go.
They could charge a little more for that.
All right.
Yeah.
An add-on.
Yep.
Hey, maybe we should come up with that. And
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.
Good morning to all of our participants that are signing on right now. We're going to give everybody a minute or two to get signed on, and then we will get started. So you may hear a little chit chat amongst us panelists as we're waiting to get going, but I think it's always a good idea to give people an extra minute or two in case they're having any little tech issues.
Okay, Susan Brawley has her hand raised, so I'm going to let her. Hey, Susan. Susan Brawley, are you there? Okay, I'm going to mute her back. She probably didn't know she had her hand raised.
She may not know.
Sometimes we don't know we have that little hand that comes up electronically.
Oh,
She
she said
says-
she's having audio issues.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It looks like she's got her host. She's been working on it for 30 minutes. It looks like she's muted. Is there any way we can try to unmute her, Karen?
You can unmute her.
Yep. Hang on.
Okay. Susan, can you hear us now? She's unmuted now.
She's probably typing. I can
I
hear
can
you.
hear you.
She's in. Nice.
All right, good.
All right, excellent. Well, I tell you what, we're at 9:03 and we've resolved our first tech issue of the day. And so we're gonna keep. Oh, she said I think she thinks it's her computer. She can hear us.
Take this.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Good.
Okay, very good.
All right, excellent. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started, and I am so glad that you are all here this morning. We've got a great group on, and this is going to be a wonderful morning. So thank you guys so much for being here with us today. A little history to why we're even having this event today. Last year, Not One More Alabama hosted a live, an in-person grief recovery workshop last October. It was held up at a place called the Vision Ministry, which is just an incredible facility. You kind of feel like you're up in the middle of the mountains in Gatlinburg when you're out there, even though you're only a few minutes from downtown Huntsville. And it was an incredible weekend, and it was really transformational, I think, for a lot of people, not only the people participating, but even some of us that were there working with the program. So it was a tremendous weekend, and we all left there saying that we can't just do this one time, that this has to be something that we continue to offer. So we had scheduled to do it again here. We had scheduled to do it again here in Huntsville this weekend. This was the weekend of the grief workshop, but obviously with COVID, we were not able to do that. And so we decided to do something to at least provide some information to help those that are looking for that kind of support right now. And so within the scope of what we could do and keep everybody safe, we came up with this 3-hour webinar format to at least be able to share some information. It's not an interactive program like our weekend program was last year, but it certainly is going to be chock full of information. And we still brought back 2 of the most amazing therapists and experts in this area that I know of. So we're so excited to have Maggie and Jack back for this. We are having next year, we have scheduled and we have booked the facility, our in-person grief weekend again next year in 2022. So mark on your calendars if you or maybe somebody you know that would benefit from it. It will be October 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. It'll be held up in Huntsville at the Vision Ministry. So you can go look on their website and see what an amazing facility it is. But we would love to have you, or we would love to have you share with those that you know who have lost somebody to any type of loss really related to substance use. But it's a tremendous opportunity to work on that. And that will be in 2022. So I want to start this morning by just saying that this program is being brought to you by 3 different organizations, and we just love the symmetry of this. Not One More Alabama is located primarily up in North Alabama. The Addiction Prevention Coalition is mostly in Central Alabama is their audience, and the Drug Education Council is located down in Mobile. So this is a real opportunity to provide something from the top of the state down to the bottom of the state. And so we're really excited to be able to do that. That was always our hope, was to get these messages throughout the state of Alabama. And so this is such an exciting collaboration that we're able to do with these 2 organizations, in addition to Not One More Alabama. We want to take just a minute to tell you a little bit about our organization so that you know who we are and what we provide. I'll start real quick with Not One More Alabama. I am on the board of directors for that organization. We started just a few years ago. We're probably one of the babies of this group. We started back in 2016, and just a group of people that came together because we had a shared experience in life. We had a lot of people we knew who had also had that shared experience, and through the process, through our journeys that we all went through, we knew that we had learned so much that it would be such a waste not to share that information with somebody else who's just going through that experience now. So we came together, formed this organization with a real goal to just go out and educate people, help support them, provide encouragement. And along the way, we have found some real opportunities to make a difference, we think. And helping people who have lost a loved one has been a real focus area of ours. We want to give a space for people to grieve their loved ones, to speak about it, to have an open place they can talk about it. We host an angel tree in the Tinsel Trail every year, which is just an incredibly beautiful tree that allows people to put photos of their loved ones, and then we hold a very public candlelight memorial to allow people to see that you know, this is something that we need to definitely be talking about. We host educational events all year long, and just all sorts of different opportunities to bring people together, connect people, and allow them to share whether they are currently struggling themselves or have a family member struggling, or if they are a family member of somebody who is in recovery, or just anybody that's just seeking information or support. So Not One More Alabama is out there. Our website is notonemorealabama.org. We have lots and lots of resources on there, and we'd love for you to go take a look at that and see if there's anything on there that might be able to help you. So I wanted to introduce to you 2 other ladies that are on here on the panel right now, and that is Carrie Wimberly and Virginia Guy, and they are from the Addiction Prevention Coalition and the Drug Education Council. So Carrie, do you want to say just a few things about what you guys are doing down there with the APC?
Sure, we'd love to. First of all, I just want to say thank you to Patty and to Not One More for inviting us into the retreat we had started talking about, and had been so impressed with what they were doing with the grief retreat. And Patty and I connected last year really over that event, and then just ended up, I think, just connecting at a heart level about what the 2 organizations were doing. And it's like, wow, let's just combine forces and be able to serve so many more people. So I appreciate that, Patty. I appreciate you being willing to do that. But yes, I'm Carrie Wimberly. I'm Director of Operations at the Addiction Prevention Coalition, and we are a nonprofit in Birmingham. We've been around about 13 years. Started really as a resource directory, but have evolved into other things, and now we focus on awareness and prevention and connection. We have an End Heroin Birmingham walk, just like Patty and Not One More have an End Heroin Huntsville walk each year, and that draws lots of different people and resources, and it's one of our favorite things that we get to do. I know that we're probably not going to get to do it in the same way next year, but Patty and I are talking about that too. So we'll see what happens as we pivot and figure out what we can do. But much of our work and day to day is around prevention, and that takes all kinds of different forms. We work with students in high schools in the Birmingham area doing prevention peer-to-peer groups. We also do social emotional learning groups in fourth grade, local elementary schools. We do all kinds of youth advisory council trainings, leadership trainings with the students so that they can lead prevention activities in their schools and in their communities. We have local coalitions doing environmental prevention work. Virginia and I are partnering right now on one of our most exciting things, and it's a virtual talent show. It's called the Alabama DFC House Party. So if you haven't seen it, please go out there and look at it. I mean, I wake up every morning and go on. I actually downloaded TikTok. I was forced to download TikTok so that I could see the entries. And I mean, I sit there and I cried this morning when I watched some of the entries. So very exciting to be able to be doing that. So love to be here. We also are very passionate about offering anything we can to families around this. I personally have had experience. 2 of our 5 children have struggled with substance use disorder, one for 15 years and one for 17 years. And we're, feel to be very lucky to still have them with us, but are very passionate about helping parents. We offer a parent support group on Mondays nights, Thursday nights, and also offer education and support all along the way. So our website is apcbham.org. We just added a parent toolbox to try to give education and support to parents to talk to their children from kindergarten all the way through adulthood to equip them. And so if we can do anything for you guys, or you have ideas about how we can support families and parents and students, then we would love to talk to you. And we love being a part of what we're doing today. So thank you, Patty.
You're welcome. And Virginia, we would love to hear a little bit more about what the Drug Education Council is doing down there, and glad that you guys are staying safe. And, hurricane season has definitely hit your area hard this year. So you guys have been in our thoughts and prayers, but would love to know a little bit more about what y'all are doing.
Great. Thank you so much. Again, I appreciate this partnership more than I can say. Our agency has such a rich history. We were formed in 1966. We were actually the first residential treatment program in South Alabama. Through the years, we have evolved and changed in order to meet unmet needs. So in the 80s, we transferred our treatment program over to another residential facility, and we went full-time into prevention. There was nobody doing prevention at that time. So we got into prevention. We currently today are doing prevention. We work with pregnant and parenting teens. We have early childhood programs. We, of course, are known mostly in this area for our K through 12 school-based programs. We work with colleges and universities. It's just the full gamut of prevention. One of the big things we know that working with kids in isolation is not as effective as working with families. So we are really stretching in order to work with the entire family, and particularly with parents on the importance of delaying the onset of alcohol and drug use as long as we can in order to prevent addiction. In order to teach, we teach about the brain disorder, the genetic predisposition, all of those kind of things. We do a lot of interventions with families and help them if they're struggling to figure out how to get their loved one into treatment, where to go, what type of, there's all kinds of, paths to recovery. So we support those. We also support recovery programs in our area. We sponsor the FAVOR Gulf Coast, which is the Faces and Voices of Recovery, which is a networking and advocacy organization for people in recovery. We've recently, about 2 or 3 years ago, formed a group called Gulf Coast Families and the Opioid Epidemic, formed primarily to address the needs and the issues of families that have lost loved ones to addiction and to overdose deaths. So we also do a professional development conference called the Gulf Coast Conference on Addiction and Recovery that's held in Orange Beach, Alabama every year. Of course, we were not able to have it this year. We are looking to be able to bring it back next year. One of the things that has come out of this pandemic and everything that has been very good for us, I feel, is the ability to partner on a statewide basis like this. So this has connected us with Not One More Alabama, the Addiction Prevention Coalition, and other organizations across the state. And I want to make sure that once we're able to get together in person again, that we keep those partnerships going. I think they will even be richer once we're able to be able to gather in person. So I'm looking forward to that. I appreciate these partnerships. I want to thank Maggie and Jack for today. I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to this. This is an issue that affects so many of us, and I'm really looking forward to today. So thank you so much, and thank you for being here. And I want to thank all the participants for their willingness to join us on a Saturday for this workshop too. So thanks so much.
All right, guys, thank you so much. I think that gives a good overview of who we are, and we're all, I think, very excited to be a part of presenting this program this morning. That takes me into, I'm going to introduce Jack and Maggie. Before I do that, let me just mention a couple of things real quick. We do have a chat box, and you are welcome to put any questions or thoughts or even resources. If there's something that when they're talking, you think of something that we would all want to know about, feel free to put that in there. We won't be addressing questions until the end. We will have question and answers at the end. So I didn't want you to think we were ignoring your questions if you put them in there, but we will be keeping up with those. And at the end, we will make sure that we address those. So with that, we are going to get started. Once we get started, we will actually, Virginia and Carrie and myself will come off of the screen. You will only see Jack and Maggie, and they will continue the program from there. But we will be here in the background, so we can see anything that you're chatting to us, and we'll be able to address those things. So with that being said, I want to go ahead and introduce Jack and Maggie, two of my all-time favorite people. You might be familiar or notice that there's a similar last name between Jack and myself, and that is because Jack is my oldest son, and I'll let him share however much he wants to share about how he ended up here today with us. But he has been a tremendous well, he is just a tremendous guy, and I am the luckiest mom in the world to have him as my son and to be able to share experiences like this. So if I say much more, I'll tear up. So that's not the goal of the day. So we'll just move on with that. But Jack is a therapist, lives in Washington, D.C. He works with the Partnership to End Addiction, which is formerly the Partnership for Drug Free. And it's, I learn daily things from Jack. He is a tremendous resource for me and helps us with lots of things with Not One More Alabama in terms of content and things to make sure that we stay on point and current in everything that we share. So very excited to have Jack here today. Maggie is another person that is just been a tremendous influence in my life. She is an incredible therapist, has her own business with Restore Counseling. And in Birmingham, I met her back in the day working for Bradford Health Services when we both worked there together. And I don't really know a person that doesn't think Maggie is one of the most incredible people that they meet in their life. So she has a spirit and a soul that is just incredible. And we are so grateful to have both of you guys here today. You are welcome to share more of your background. I didn't sit and read a resume on either of you, but you are both well-versed in being both both therapists with expertise in substance use as well as in the area of grief. And so we are thrilled to have you both here today. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and say we're going to come off and we're going to turn it over to you two, and they will run with it. At the very end, we will circle back and be here to share any last minute questions or things at the end. So turning it over to you guys.
Thank you so much, Patty.
Thank you.
And thank you for your words, your kindness. Jack and I both are so incredibly happy to be here this morning. And the title of this presentation is something that just was birthed within my soul and in my spirit, that we need to remember to remember ourselves. Many times grief and loss, it makes us feel completely ripped apart in different ways. And so throughout this talk, we're going to be talking about what kinds of different losses there are related to the disease of addiction. There are so many more than just death and divorce, but those are the two biggies of all types of grief and loss. But when we remember fully our whole entire story and our relationships, we are able to remember our lives together. And although things will never be the same and there may be scars, we are able to have divine stitching to put us back together through spiritual means that help us continue to function holistically throughout the rest of our lives. And so Jack is going to be our tech guy this morning. He is doing all of the slides while we're going through things. And so since I'm already talking, Jack, I'll just go ahead and give a little bio on myself.
You got it.
And so I did work for Bradford Health Services for over a decade. Prior to that, I did research on cognition and aging and mobility at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. That was prior to me getting licensed in the state of Alabama as a counselor. And then 3 years ago, I embarked on a courageous effort to be a private practice clinician. And that has been one of the biggest joys of my life. It has afforded me opportunities to do more and more things like this. And grief and addiction are the two passions of my life and of working with people. And you likely will see that and hear that as I continue to speak. I get really pumped up about these kinds of things. And so that is what I do. My practice is located in Hoover, Alabama, which is right beside Birmingham. It's a little bit south of it. I am available through the email address that you see there. You can find me online at Psychology Today. You can find me on my website, restorecounselingservices.net. And I am open to all kinds of questions and thoughts. So please, again, feel free to do things. Jack, you can say whatever you need or want to. And then I do have a blessing that I would like to start us with this morning before I start going over a couple of things.
Love it. Thank you, Maggie. And thank you to all three of those wonderful organizations in that intro. I was thinking, how awesome is it that there's as many organizations in the state of Alabama providing resources, services, and education. I work for the Partnership to End Addiction. We're a national service, and we kind of look at, each state and what resources and services are there. And quite frankly, for a lot of states, there's not much, right? And so really, really awesome to be here. I'm grateful, my heart's a little saddened that we're not able to do the in-person, but I also think that this is a wonderful opportunity to be able to make this kind of education accessible to people. So, like I said, like my mother introduced me, I don't have much more to add to it, but my name is Jack Sykstus. I am her son. I also identify as a person in long-term recovery. That means that in March 17 of next year, I'll have 9 years of abstinence from all, mind-altering substances. So when I say that, I'm really intentional about the language I use, right? And we will talk about that in a little bit, but in that I am a marriage and family therapist in the state of Virginia, working on that DC licensure as well. But I also work as a helpline specialist through the partnership and focus really on digital services on a nationwide basis, right? How are we reaching a lot of people in trying to provide them education and resources and services on a national level. So I kind of do a lot of different things. I've enjoyed kind of the tech part of clinical interventions, but I would say, you know, with kind of my own journey, when I was in Bradford some years ago, I so happened to have Maggie as my grief counselor. It was 3 8-hour sessions. That's a long time to do psychotherapy in any type of group. And I remember by the end of that third day, I felt, going back to that last slide, I didn't know what happened, but looking back on reflection, I felt like I could move forward with my life again. I didn't feel like I had parts of my life that were siloed and fragmented. I felt like I was kind of put back together after that third day. I couldn't have used those words in that moment, but looking back, I felt healing, right? And so it really kind of started my own journey in wanting to become a counselor. And my strengths really lie in kind of more behavioral changes, really looking at like our cognitions and our beliefs about how we feel about ourselves, and then looking like how can we make meaningful behavior change to kind of represent the values that we hold for ourselves. And then I, at some point, because of that experience with Maggie, I ended up becoming certified through the Grief Recovery Institute and have implemented some grief groups within intensive outpatient settings, as well as trying to bring it into the digital work. So that is a little bit about me. Maggie, I will turn it back over to you for the blessing, and you'll have the next couple of slides as well.
All right. Thanks, Jack. I did forget to mention I am a certified grief recovery specialist through the Grief Recovery Institute. I am an advanced certified relapse prevention therapist through the CNAPS program, which is Terry Gorski's program, who recently passed away as well and died not too long ago. His funeral was so fantastic. It was precious to watch and be a part of. And so I do hold those kinds of things. I just honestly don't ever talk about them because I don't think about it. I just do what I do. And so this is a blessing. I don't know how well you can see my book, but this is a book by John O'Donohue. He is a Celtic writer and former priest. And this is from his book of blessings to bless the space between us. And it is a short blessing I wanted to start us with, and then we will continue to move forward. Again, if you have questions, comments, thoughts, post those in the chat or the Q&A piece. We are having that monitored throughout this time period, and we will address all of those at the end if they have not been answered throughout the presentation. Thank you. I arise today in the name of silence, womb of the word. In the name of stillness, home of belonging. In the name of the solitude of the soul and the earth. I arise today, blessed by all things, wings of breath, delight of eyes, wonder of whisper, intimacy of touch, eternity of soul, urgency of thought, miracle of health, embrace of God. May I live this day, compassionate of heart, clear in word, gracious in awareness, courageous in thought, and generous in love. Thank you for allowing me to share that blessing over all of you this morning. And I always love to start things with different quotations from people that I really love. And this next slide is from Henry Nouwen. And he's best known for writing The Wounded Healer is one of his most famous books. He was on staff at the Harvard School of Divinity for a long time prior to his retirement and his death. But he says, the friend who can be silent with us in a moment of despair or confusion, who can stay with us in an hour of grief and bereavement, who can tolerate not knowing, not curing, not healing, and face with us, the reality of our powerlessness. That is a friend who cares. And to me, grief recovery is about being this person to ourselves, but also learning how to receive that from others and to be that to other people. And so we will be going into the process again throughout the day about how to do all of those things. But I think it's important at the beginning of these talks to kind of look at what is loss and what is grief, okay? Because many people get kind of confused about that. And so the easiest way for me when I think about stuff is loss is the loss. It's what I don't have anymore. If it's a person, place, or thing, institution, whatever that may be. And then the grief process is the emotional side that goes all around that and surrounds everything. Jack, if you'll go back one slide, I was just going to tell you what Google says, that loss is destruction and ruin. It's deprivation. It's the act of losing possession. It's a decrease in an amount of magnitude or degree, and so it's a reduction. Again, what I just said, a person, place, thing, amount, that was loss. And so a lot of times we think about loss with like profit and loss and things of that nature, especially within the kind of economy that we have within the United States of America, you know, being deprived of things. And that is certainly a big part of this. But grief, like I said, and Jack, you can go on now. Thank you so much. Is the set of emotions that go around all of that. So it's a multifaceted response to loss, particularly to the loss of someone or something that has died, to which a bond or an affection was formed. Although conventionally focused on the emotional response to loss, it also has physical, cognitive, behavioral, social, cultural, spiritual, and philosophical dimensions. While the terms are often used interchangeably, bereavement refers to the state of loss and grief is the reaction to that loss. So I would say loss is the what, bereavement is the state of that, and grief is all of the emotional reaction and the physiological reaction, the spiritual reaction, all of that around it. Jack, if you could continue to put those up there for me. It's deep and poignant distress caused by basically bereavement, or we can say something grieves us. It's a trouble, it's an annoyance. We can say something vexes or grieves us. It's an annoyance. Sometimes you're grieving me is a playful criticism or an unfortunate outcome. To me, grief is the normal and natural reaction to the significant emotional loss of any kind. And then my favorite definition of grief, and the one I use the most, is this from John James and Russell Friedman of the Grief Recovery Institute. Grief is the conflicting feelings caused by the end of or change in a familiar pattern of behavior. And the reason I like that the most is because it doesn't define anything specifically by a death. That's not used in there. Death is encompassed within all of that. But grief is the set of conflicting feelings caused by the end of or change in a familiar pattern of behavior. They also say it's the feeling of reaching out for someone who has always been there, only to find that when you need them again, they are no longer there. And John James and Russell Friedman, again, are the pioneers of the Grief Recovery Institute, by which Jack and I have both been certified in our career process. I use their techniques a lot. I use a lot more techniques than just that, and I know Jack does as well. We implement a multitude of things, and now I believe it's time for Jack to take over for a little bit and me to hush, maybe.
You jump in anytime, Maggie. You know, and before I go to the next slide, I was thinking of kind of that last one, right? The grief is the feeling of reaching out for someone who has always been there, only to find when you need them again and they are no longer there. And how many things in our lives, substance use. I know that every time that I drank, every time that I used opiates, every time that I smoked weed, every time I used acid, I could depend on it. And it provided me with a sense of warmth and safety. And I got rid of that, right? I started to reach out. For some people I've worked with, they reach out and it no longer gives them that same effect, right? For some people I've reached out with, they've made a decision or a commitment to not use anymore and still need that same safety, right? And so I just love that. I kind of like to name that as absence, right? Is I no
Yes.
longer, I see that thing and I no longer have access to it. So kind of looking at just a little bit more of, the symptomology of grief for these next few slides, what grief is and what it is not, right? If we go through here, right, reduced concentration, a sense of numbness, disrupted sleeping patterns, changed eating habits, the roller coaster of emotional energy. And we're going to talk more about the roller coaster specifically for substance use of that emotional energy, right? But there's lots of very typical responses that we can attribute to grief. And then Maggie was kind of saying like the what, right? These are just some examples of loss. Loss can be anything in your life. And I was going to offer that we can also talk about the impact. I know I was working, I'm just going to make sure. Yeah. I was working with an individual, and he had been dating his partner for about 5 months, and she died tragically and suddenly. And he was so torn up. He was like, I've had many partners. Every other relationship had been way longer, but this loss hurt the most. And he was very confused about that. And we had to reframe that as the impact of somebody in your life. You'll never understand the impact. So even though it was 5 months compared to those 3-year, 5-year relationships, he said, I care more about this individual than I do some family members. And it shows
Yes.
how impactful that was. So
And
I really
Jack,
like thinking
I
about,
wanted to interject in on that. I always talk about that spiritual time and spiritual dimension, so to speak, is very different than chronological time. And so that goes along with the impact. When we are dealing with an emotional and a spiritual issue, an issue of the soul, the impact can be extreme on someone, even if it was a passing type relationship. So it's not necessarily, again, quantity of time, years, days, whatever it may be, interactions of seeing each other. It is about the depth of connectivity that happens and the depth and strength of the bond that occurs within that relationship. Thanks for letting me interject.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I know Maggie and I are given a lot of info. There'll be breaks, so don't worry about that. I forgot to name that up front. So just as we look at different types of losses, right? Death and divorce, very kind of common. Retirement, I feel like there is some, we talk about, it's a change in state. I used to work with a psychologist that used to talk any change of psychological state, emotional state, or physical state, there's loss. Right? And that change could be a great thing. I'm moving into retirement. I've worked my butt off to get to a point where I don't have to wake up and go to work anymore. But then that really can kind of change maybe parts of your identity, parts of your routine even. So there's loss there. Moving, pet loss, financial changes, loss of health, empty nest, end of addiction, end of abstinence, right? Maybe I've been abstinent for a long time, and now I'm trying maybe a harm reduction. Maybe I fall right back into relapse. People grieve their time that they've lost. People grieve the change of that state. Starting school, I was thinking about COVID, right? And how many changes that we've experienced and lost. So starting school, ending school can be some of those losses. Those are pretty physical ones, right? We can also talk about some intangible examples. Loss of trust, loss of safety, right? I was talking about substance use. There's the actual loss of maybe just the people, places, and things around substance use, but there's the loss of safety that I felt that heroin gave me, right? There's maybe if I lose a close family member that I knew I could call and depend on, there's a loss of control in my life. There's a loss of faith in that person. There might be a loss of faith in the religious sense, right? How could my God do that to me? Who would take this person, especially with tragic loss? I see that can be very common. Loss of fertility, right? And there is both a tangible and an intangible loss in some of those. And a lot of times, most losses have intangibles and tangibles attached to them. I think the challenge is give yourself permission to explore those intangibles. That's the scary place to go to. It's all scary, right? But that's the really scary place to kind of explore and be a part of. So what is grief, right? Grief is individual and unique. Your grief is your grief, right? There are no cement stages of grief, and grief cannot be neatly categorized. The more that I do this work, and Maggie, you've been doing this longer than, it is not a nice fluid stage process, right? Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's original work was on death and dying, right? It is not specific to the grief process. This misinformation has been confused and has hurt many grievers throughout the years, per James and Friedman, again, from the Grief Recovery Institute. This is due to the belief that you have all five and you work through them. Maggie, I'm thinking other things. Can you remind us the five?
All right, we have denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And so those are the stages of grief that were identified in Kubler-Ross's work on death and dying, which was set initially to deal with long-term illness such as cancer for the person who was diagnosed and their closest caregiver. And so that work was taken and it was generalized to all loss. Kubler-Ross herself then came back and wrote another book called On Grief and Grieving. And that explains more about this process. It is not firm, it is not cement. And so a lot of people have taken that and thought, well, okay, I have to get angry. I have to be depressed. I have to bargain back and forth with God. I have to get to a place of acceptance. And when I get there, I have to stay there. And that is what has been confusing. It's not that James and Friedman don't believe in Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work. They believe it was misappropriated. And I agree with them.
Yep. And in doing this work, grief is this I can experience all those and 7 other stages within an afternoon, right? And at one moment I'm in acceptance, and the next moment I'm in denial, and the next moment I'm with my loved one again. That's not part of the 5 stages, right? And then the next moment I am just experiencing something that's not on those stages, and that's totally okay. Right. So I remember I was always kind of given those 5 emotions. I remember when I lost my friend when I was 18, I was given like a little worksheet. And I was like, I don't really resonate with any of this. Right. This is not.
And bless you. Do you hear what you just said? I was given a little worksheet. Right. I lost my best friend and I was given a little worksheet. Let's just leave that sitting right there. Yep. That's enough in and of itself. That speaks volumes.
You're right.
And that wasn't somebody intending to hurt you. That was somebody intending to help you. Yep. But what that said is that everything in my relationship can be reduced to me answering some questions on this piece of paper.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to let that sit where that is. Yep. You're right. Their grief, again, is individual and unique, right? There are no absolutes in grief, no universal reactions, although there are commonalities, right? Grief is normal and natural. We're also going to talk about substance use being normal and natural. I actually hadn't put this together. That was unintentional. So there's a nice symbiosis there, but grief is normal and natural. It is not a pathological condition or personality disorder. It's not. And quite frankly, if you go and look at a lot of the pathological conditions and psychopathology, a lot of them will say, is there grief happening in that person's life? Has there been grief in the last, I think, 6 months to a year? You need to assess for that before you start diagnosing individuals. Grief is also not a lot of things, right? It's not anxiety, holding one's breath, overstimulation in social situations, intrusive obsessive thoughts about losing another, person or place or thing, bouts of energy, hypervigilance, in physiological fight or flight, sleep disturbances. All these symptoms are part of the grief process, right? If you are experiencing loss and grief in your world, you do not have generalized anxiety disorder. You don't. You might be experiencing some symptoms of generalized anxiety disorder, but you're experiencing symptoms of grief, right? And lastly, and then I'll pass it back to you, Maggie, it's also not depression. Look at these: difficulty concentrating, roller coaster of emotions, sense of numbness, disrupted sleep patterns, altered eating habits, massive loss of energy. that's exactly what we said 3-4 slides ago, what grief
Yeah.
is, right? So just being mindful, grief is a lot of things, but it's not a pathological condition. Maggie, I think I'm going to pass it back here for you.
Yes. Thanks so much, Jack, for those explanations, and thanks for letting me chime in on you. And then
Yeah.
please feel free to chime in on me. I have to tell you guys, presenting with Jack last year was the first thing that we had collaborated on, and it was one of the great honors of my life to be able to do that. I have over the years watched Jack grow as a person and as a clinician, and I could not be prouder. I almost feel like Jack is one of my spiritual babies, and I love him deeply, and I'm so honored to be able to do this with you this morning.
Yeah, same, Maggie. I consider you to be a mentor and somebody very close in my life, so always a pleasure to do this. Yeah.
So, unresolved grief. As we grieve and complete the events and behaviors of our past, we become open to our ability to be happy. Let's talk about unresolved grief. In John James and Russell Friedman's work, they actually call it emotional incompletion. So some people use these terms interchangeably, and I may. So please don't get hung up on the semantics. Unresolved grief is things that have happened in your life that are lost, that have emotions wrapped around them, that have accumulated over the course of time. So Jack, if you'll go ahead and go to that next slide. When loss occurs, there are often several conversations or actions that have not taken place that are significant to the person who has the loss experience, okay? And so that is what they term as emotional incompletion within a relationship, whatever type it may be. Now, how do we know if we are incomplete with a loss? And that's going to be on this next slide here. And I saw somebody in the chat had asked about making slides available. We'll look at putting that into a PDF form for you later and emailing that out. We just prefer that you not teach off of our materials or pass those around without our permission. That's all. And so glad for you to use them, glad for you to learn with them. That is what they are for. Okay. All right. How do we know if somebody is incomplete within a loss? Well, first and foremost, somebody is unwilling to think or talk about someone who has died or any other of the types of losses that that have occurred within their life. And so we listed several of those. And so Jack, I'm on that next slide now. Thanks, buddy. And for me, when I think about that, for many of us, we go ahead and we go through what Russell and Friedman term as shock. They don't term it as denial. Many times it's not a denial if there has been a death. We understand that someone is physiologically dead, but the shock of that has actually put us into what I call a brain fog. And so many times we have no words. And then also there are those of us who have been trained throughout our family of origin communication systems that we don't talk about anything that's not perceived as happy or that doesn't look well outside of our homes. And so for many of us, any of the losses that we experience, we're not going to talk about anything that may be perceived as negative. So that's one way that you can begin to know if you are or if someone else is incomplete with a loss, is that they cut you off about talking about that relationship or entity completely. Recalling fond memories turns painful every time that you are thinking about that. It always goes straight to pain. You're not able to experience the sadness and the joy or the happiness, the fondness at that same time. This wanting to talk only about the negative or only positive aspects of a lost relationship. within James and Friedman's work, they talk about sanctifying or bedeviling. And so there are many cases where, for instance, if you've been in a long-term partnership / relationship for a while and you guys are broken up or getting a divorce, all of a sudden that person has turned into a snake. They were a no good so-and-so. They never were worth anything. And your family members and friends will actually say this to you. And then you're like, wait a minute. Why have you never said these things to me before? Why didn't we talk about these things before? And so everything turns negatively and sour and demonizes actually this person, so that we can just put everything outside of us into this box over here and not actually deal with the relationship holistically. The other piece of that is oftentimes when someone dies, especially when they die, what I would consider out of order, such as we lose a grandchild or a niece or nephew, or God forbid, a child. We turn them into a saint in their death. We only think about anything positive, and we don't allow ourselves to experience the holistic relationship piece of there were negative experiences within this relationship. And it doesn't all have to be, especially within this realm, related to substance use. It could have just been you guys had a fight and it was never resolved. It could have been they called you a name or you called them a name and you wish you could have apologized. And so you only focus on the positive aspects. And one of the biggest things, especially with death, is a term called enshrinement. And people will actually create shrines to people. And I'm not talking about having pictures out and about of your loved ones. I am talking about creating something that looks like and is and magnifies all the aspects of a relationship that actually did not exist. So, that is something to look at, because we're not looking at the relationship holistically. And then again, unresolved grief may be at the root of any fears that are associated with thoughts or feelings about a relationship. And so if we have fears about being able to say anything out loud or express anything within this relationship, there's usually unresolved grief up underneath that, okay? And so I want to look a little bit at what complicated grief is, and that's on that next slide, Jack. And complicated grief by your diagnostic medical definitions. And so we're looking at this from the DSM-5. We're looking at this from the DSM-4-TR, which preceded that, and also from the American Medical Association. So we're looking at the medical definitions here, okay? Complicated grief is identified by the extended length of time of the symptoms, the interference in normal function caused by the symptoms, or by the intensity of the symptoms. For example, intense suicidal thoughts or acts. It occurs within the presence of adjustment disorders such as depressed or anxious mood, okay? Then another one is complicated grief may appear as a complete absence of grief and mourning, an ongoing inability to express normal grief reactions, delayed grief, conflicted grief, or chronic grief. Factors that contribute to the chance that one may experience complicated grief include the suddenness of the death, the gender of the person in mourning, and the relationship to the deceased. For example, if it's an intense, extremely close, or very contradictory relationship, like we were just talking about, there are undone things. Loss is out of order. In our society, we typically expect males to die prior to females because the life expectancy, while it is getting closer together, males is still shorter than females at this time. And so when a man is left without his partner or spouse, it is very different in the mourning process than it is for a female. And so there are different presentations of the complicated grief. And so of note, these medical definitions only discuss death, okay? And Jack, if you'll put that up on the bottom there, they do not mention any of the other losses that occur within the lifespan. And again, I want to go back to, as we continue to talk about cumulative unresolved grief. Again, this portion right here, I could teach on for a day. Okay, so we're learning by fire hydrant here. This is not us giving you a cup of water. This is fire hydrant learning. And Jack and I do realize this. This is stuff typically that we would teach a little bit on and then be with you for a whole weekend to answer questions as you chew on this material. That's why we want you to be able to email us or send any questions that you have. We're glad for you to review those PowerPoints because it is learning by fire hydrant.
Yeah.
And so go ahead, Jack. Do you have
I was just going to
say?
say each of these segments, I was going to say at the beginning, each of these segments, there are individuals that are dedicating their entire lives to understanding and studying these things, right? So Maggie and I are doing our best to give you the pertinent information, but yes, we're here, right? If something is said and you feel like you need more, you email us. That email that I put sends to this phone sitting right here. So
Mine too. There it is.
Mm-hmm.
So as we continue on, cumulative unresolved grief. These are losses that are accrued across the course of a lifetime in which there is emotional incompletion within 2 or more losses. All right. And unresolved grief is always cumulative and cumulatively negative. And so that's again per James and Friedman. And you'll hear me quote them a lot because that's who I spent the most time with within their training. But also I do quote Kubler-Ross a lot. I quote Megan Devine a lot now that I've read her newer book. It is fantastic. I'll talk about it later. And there are wonderful, wonderful grief materials. I have 3 books sitting here with me in addition to my unpacking binder, which is what I call my grief intensive that I do. But I want to talk about the unresolved grief for a moment. If you consider Russ Friedman and John James's definition of loss and grief. So grief is the emotional experience that accrues within the change of a familiar pattern of behavior. Okay, let's just synthesize it like that. So when I moved when I was 6, and my mom and dad said to me, well, you'll still be able to go over and see your friends and y'all can talk on the phone and blah, blah, blah. And that didn't happen, but I was supposed to be happy because we were in a new, bigger house and I went to this new, really cool school. I just kind of put a box around that and pretended I was happy. And I didn't talk about anything about feeling sad. And then later on that year, my dog got killed in the car by being run over by a car. And that was really terrible. And we did have a funeral for that, for the puppy, and we buried my puppy in the backyard. But they went ahead and bought me a new one. And so in my mind, I thought, okay, well, I'm just supposed to bury my puppy and act like they're gone. And now I have this new one. So yay, let's keep going. And so then I put a box around that because I can't really talk about my old puppy anymore because I'm supposed to be so happy that they bought me this new one. And so I say those to say this all starts from before we even have the ability to be cognitive of our own responses. There is neurocognition and neuroscience that goes along with this process. Our brains are not capable until around the age of even 12 for our frontal lobe developing. Okay, and your frontal lobe is what is able to give you the ability to abstract reason and to be able to see beyond the immediate moment, to not be stuck in rigid thinking of it's either this or that. So when things occur when you are a small child, it is what you see is what you get. And we think our authority figures are correct about everything. And we may have had the best of parents with the best of intentions. And I can tell you, I have a great set of parents. Both are still living, and I'm grateful for that. Jack, I know, has a great set of parents, and both are still living, and I'm grateful for that. And I know you are too, buddy. And we still experience losses because nobody's a perfect parent. Nobody's a perfect human being. Nobody is a perfect authority figure. And so as children, we are making these determinations about how things are by what we see. And so however loss has been modeled for us in our lives, we're going to replicate that whether we like it or not. And then that goes into this next slide, Jack, which is the root relationships. So when I speak about root relationships, they are the relationships of our formation as human beings: father, mother, grandparents, caregivers, teachers, coaches, spiritual directors, etc. Okay? And these typically have a lot of emotional incompletion within them, period. So that would be whether a person was present or not, what the person did or did not do, whether the relationships were good or not. These people and entities can still be living and present within your life or not at the time of the identification of these things, okay? And the work to be completed to address the cumulative grief. So sometimes, and in fact, I will tell you most times, the grief work that I do with people is with people that are living. And I want to firmly express this. Grief work that you do is for you. It is for no one else. I often talk about my spiritual channel that is within me. And I consider unresolved grief, unresolved loss, accumulated loss, to be a clog within my spiritual channel. And that is what grief work does for me. I call it spiritual Drano. It is the ability to go in and soften and loosen up and rid ourselves of the clogs that are within us spiritually that hold us back from being fully human, fully vulnerable, fully connected to ourselves, to those around us, and to the God of our understanding. And so what happens with all of this is that it literally seeps and stays within our system, okay? And it becomes what we call cellular. We literally just swallow it and put it into our body. And so in that next slide, Eckhart Tolle wrote a book called A New Earth. And within that book, he has the concept called the pain body. And the pain body is any negative emotion that is not fully faced and seen for what it is in the moment it arises, and it does not completely dissolve. So it leaves behind this remnant of pain. Jack, if you'll throw up that on the purple part right there and the rest of it, that would be awesome. So again, any negative emotion that is not fully faced and seen for what it is in the moment it arises does not completely dissolve. It leaves behind a remnant of pain. And so these are the things: what was said or not said, what was done or not done, how things, whether somebody was present or not. These things, okay, it's mental and emotional baggage from the grievances, the regrets, the hostility, the guilt, all of these strong emotions, they get strengthened within our own ego identity. And so we begin making decisions based on all of these suppressed and repressed grief responses that honestly we didn't even know were incorrect. So please hear me clearly. I'm not telling you you are knowingly doing something wrong with how you cope in your life. We all were taught different things that didn't work for us. And we perpetuate these patterns of behavior until they are brought to our attention and we make a conscious choice about what we do with those things. And so unresolved grief within root relationships, I believe, begins and sustains the pain body that surrounds us. And so I'm going to use that terminology like Tole did, okay? And that is significant because that is like this energy field that walks around me, and that's what I interact through with everyone and everything that I come in contact with. That's what I filter everything through that comes to me, is through all of this unresolved grief. Okay, so Jack, if you'll go to the next slide and put all that up, that would be awesome. So evidence of grief in the pain body. With the emotional side of that, you're going to have anxiety, depression, irritability, despair, okay? Physically, there's going to be fatigue, hypervigilance, ulcers, high blood pressure, inflammatory diseases, headaches, insomnia, eating habit changes, chemical dependency, eating disorders. There could be a lot more than that. Psychologically, we've got inattentiveness, mood dysregulation, isolation, irrationality. There's impulsivity and multiple forms of addiction. And so those things are how grief gets embedded within our system and manifests itself within these different areas. And we're going to kind of go into some more of these different types of things as we go along the way. But Jack, I believe we're at a place where we probably need to get up and wiggle around. I mean,
That's
the fire
right.
hydrant has just been blown and released.
And
I realize this. And so we're taking, I believe, a 10-minute break. And
Yep.
so I've got 10:07 on my trusty clock here.
Yep.
Cool. And so if we could all return at 10:17 promptly, Jack and I have some more information to throw at you. And again, use your chat box and everything for any questions or comments. And we will return in 10 minutes. So go to the restroom, stretch your legs, go freshen up your coffee, because that's where I'm going. And I'll see you in a little bit. Bye,
right
friends.
back.
We'll be right back. Hey, Jack, I'm
Yeah.
going to go
What do we
ahead
got?
and mute.
Oh,
I'm going
my
to,
everything's still set on Eastern time for me. 11:16 though.
yeah, I'm going to go ahead and mute myself right now because you're going to be teaching for a little bit. Okay. And so, I'll unmute and pipe in if I feel so strongly to do so, but you know, you do your thing.
I'm gonna plow
I'm
through.
here.
Yeah, I know, and I can lean on you, but some of this is it's going to be, you've done this work for a long time, so
Yeah,
yeah, feel free to jump in. Um,
will do.
I'm looking through the chat real quick.
Yeah, let's do that. I did put out some stuff there in the chat to everybody. Just
Yep.
my own heart to you all about we all have a lot of work to do. We're
Mm-hmm.
continually learning, growing, and working to be our best selves. We can
Yeah.
only eat one bite at a time, so don't allow
Right.
all of this to overwhelm you. We're going to
Yep.
start somewhere and continue moving forward, and we're going to get you into some how-tos, okay? And so I want for you guys to know we understand that hearing all of this at one time, actually for me, it would make me want my head to go, you know, just, and so we are aware of that this is not for you to take all of this and try to fix it. Again, it's not fixing it. It is allowing this stuff to begin to sit with you and bubble up so that you can know where you need to start.
Yep.
We all have a starting point, okay? And so I'm going to hush now, okay? And I'll try and let Jack talk.
Yeah, and I think all the time, especially when we do formats like this, like how are things edible and digestible? And one of the downsides to COVID, right, is that we're not able to do this in person. We're not able to be there, and so find those people that you can lean on and you can support. So if you're feeling super overwhelmed when we ramp up today, we got resources for you. I know they're going to be in the chat. We'll talk about them at the end, but also go and call somebody or spend some time with somebody that is meaningful to you, because it is a lot. It's a ton. Even going through it, I get emotional as we're going through this, right? And I'm doing this. I'm the one teaching it. This is emotional. It's very activating, just kind of going through this. And I am mindful we're going to probably go into, for some of you, a little, probably the heaviest part of this. So if you're just saying that's too much, get up and leave. We're going to take another break, right? Go and get you a stress ball, stand up a little bit, do some stretches, right? So this will be a little heavier. We're going to start off with just kind of building that foundation about substance use. We're going to then overlay it with a lot of the stuff that Maggie just talked about and really talking about the unique parts of substance use. We'll have another break in there. And then we're going to come in about like the idea of what can you do, right? What are maybe some strategies, techniques, skills? What are some of those strategies that aren't working? And what are some of the strategies that we see that do work? So that's our roadmap as we get to 12. So I have a little self-reflection exercise. We're going to spend here and just we're going to put 2 minutes on the clock. And I want you to think about behaviors that you use that make you feel better about yourself, helps you feel more confident, allows you to cope with negative feelings, allows you to cope with positive feelings, help you think through a problem you're experiencing. Maybe that's a professional problem, maybe that's a personal problem. Give you permission to be yourself, feel confident about yourself, cope with loss, promote weight loss, promote weight gain, changes the way you feel. If you don't mind, you can either just write it in your head, write it down, or put it in the chat and just share with us. And those are any behaviors you're proud of, behaviors you're struggling with, but we'll just kind of give that. I don't know, chat features is acting a little weird. I will throw in a few for myself in the chat if I can pull it up.
And Jack, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to throw in some of mine.
Yep, awesome. Computer's been acting a little funky. Oh, here we go. Excellent. We'll give it just a few minutes or a few more seconds here. I'm going to read just a couple that have been coming in. Exercise, walking outside by myself. I put in here binge eating, eating too many sweets, isolating, right? William mentioned working around the house. Let's see. We have a couple of Susans. One Susan exercising, playing piano, reading good books. Yeah, what a great one. Sewing clothes or doing cross stitch. Call an understanding friend, take a nap, yelling, anger outbursts. That's right, Maggie. Baking.
Yes.
Yes. Yep. Eating too much bread and cheese. Absolutely. All of these are really great ones. And I wanted to kind of just spend a few minutes to think about behaviors. Before we kind of dive just into substance use, let's be mindful that substance use is a behavior. The last one I'll read, Derek: prayer, exercise, recovery meetings, coaching youth, meditation.
Yes.
Awesome, right? And I will say, see if I can get to the next slide here. Sorry guys, my computer's been a little funky. If I go off, I have a backup computer, so I will be back in a second. So I do ask to just kind of think about, were all these behaviors healthy? Everyone that you came up with, was every single one of them healthy? I would say I know in my list it wasn't, right? But were all these behaviors unhealthy? Probably not. You probably had, I was looking at Derek's list. There were some really healthy ones in there, right? Meditation, recovery meetings, somebody put in baking, right? And I also think with behaviors, we can look at frequency and intensity of behaviors, right? If I'm baking all day long and not talking and doing my daily activities of daily living, we might need to talk about your baking problem, right? But if I'm baking on a Saturday night and it's a way for me to soothe and cope, it's a wonderful skill. So thinking about, did you use some of these behaviors more frequently and others less frequently? And what might cause that change, right? And a lot of times we see changes in environment, stressors in our daily life, right? Loss, vitality. Sometimes I'm just feeling full of life. I'm going to go work out twice today, right? Emotions, relationships. One thing that blows my mind is that in the DSM-5, we have nothing about relational stress and being, I can't bill as a practitioner, I cannot bill your insurance due to marital problems. And we know one of the greatest stressors is relational issues, right? If my child, loved one, my partner, grandparents, if I'm struggling in a relationship, that impacts my entire essence as a person. Of course, I might do some of those more short-term relieving strategies that we'll talk more about later. And do you use any of these behaviors still today? And do you want to make a change, right? I know that I put in there binge eating for me. I don't use that behavior as much these days. It has certainly been a part of my life, right? That was another change that I've made. Changed the way that I eat, changed the way I approach the relationship to my physical self, right? And I had to look at making a change to that behavior, just like I had to look at making a change to substance use, right? And so just thinking about the idea that we all engage in a variety of behaviors to cope with this crazy, chaotic thing that we call life, right? We all have, and a lot of them will come from our family of origin. A lot of them we develop because they work. As I look through that list, every behavior you listed worked. And there's no difference with substance use, right? Behaviors make sense. Substance use is just another behavior. For some of you that might be in this webinar, you might still drink. Not that is drinking. Drinking alcohol is one of the oldest forms of coping in this world, right? It like started with like making bread and hunting and alcohol use. And then opium was not too far afterwards, right? And so we all have our own stories about substance use, whether it is through other individuals or ourselves. A lot of individuals I work with, they'll talk about their experiences with their parents drinking. Some part of your relationship with substances. Maybe it's yourself, right? Maybe it is your child, right? But that is part of your narrative when it comes to substance use. Just like grieving is a natural and normal behavior or reaction to loss, substance use is a natural and normal behavior. We might change that behavior, but that is part of your narrative when it comes to it, right? Our relationship with substance use is guided by boundaries, dictated by our own experiences with substance use. As I work, my practice is primarily around substances, but I sometimes will get lots of individuals that are not, a severe substance use disorder. Maybe it's a little mild, right? Maybe it's in a relationship and they're about to have a child. I've had a lot of new couples or new parents that I've been working with, right? And all of a sudden, with entries and exits in our family of origins, life's going to get a little wild, right? So with that entry into their new family, right, and the family system's changing, they start evaluating their substance use. They're not alcoholics, right? But they're probably drinking a little bit more than they want to, so they're slowing it down. They're looking at their relationship with alcohol use or the relationship with marijuana. Really, I know Adderall. It's a very common one that people evaluate the relationship with. And based on their new experiences, they're going to change that relationship. We look at severe substance use disorder, nothing changes, but our midbrain functioning gets a little hijacked, right? That's that disease model, and it makes that change a little bit more difficult to make in that relationship. So part of behaviors make sense is that there's a cost versus benefit of a behavior, right? How much benefit is this behavior bringing me versus the cost of any behavior? And substance use, I will say, in my years of working in various capacities with people using substances, I've never met somebody where it didn't make sense. After sitting down and being that heart with ears, that language, Maggie, thank you for giving me that metaphor. I just sit and I listen and I absorb. And at the end of hearing somebody's story, of course you're shooting up heroin. Of course you're using cocaine and alcohol to the point you're not happy with, but I get it. Behaviors always make sense, right? The cost benefit of substance use, because from afar I look and I see your life is falling apart. I am looking at all the cost, but the benefit is that it's the only thing that it's really left in my life that is dependable and consistent and still provides me with the sense of safety. There was a study that just came out like 3 days ago, and they evaluated the relationships of homeless individuals in New York City and St. Louis. And the number one thing that came out was that heroin was the best thing that they had in their life for most of those individuals because it provided them a sense of safety and security. And it was the only way most of them could go to sleep, right? I'm looking maybe as a loved one saying, I can't understand why you continue to use. And they're saying it's the only thing I feel like I have left in my life. Behaviors make sense. We know it, right? Our loved ones who use substances, and I use loved one because I don't know who you are in these webinars and where you're coming from, but our loved ones can refer to anybody that is meaningful in your life that might be using substances, right? Loved one is very open. That could be a friend, a family member, a parent, a child, grandchild, aunt, uncle, sibling, somebody you just know about who's struggling through somebody else. That's a loved one, right? And our loved ones, they use substances are no different, except in the regards of their boundaries might be different. What's acceptable to you and your boundaries around alcohol, marijuana, cocaine, heroin might be different than the next person's boundaries. They just might be, right? The benefit either outweighed the cost of using, depending on where your loved one's at. And I do want to be mindful, right? The disease model of addiction really does sit well within this because that hijacked midbrain functioning distorts what I perceive to be a benefit and a cost, right? We overlay the symptoms of dependence. We overlay the symptoms of other people's expectations of me. We can really see that the disease model really fits nicely into understanding that behaviors make sense. So I kind of want to build the intersection. Maggie, were you going to throw something in there real quick?
No, I'm just listening to you and I'm just like, yes, 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 yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. Normalizing this, I think, is critically important. We are not saying that we condone harmful behaviors of any type to any of us. We are saying we all do something.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. Understanding does not equal condoning. That is one of the most, when I learned that, I felt like that was the most powerful because it allows me to be a heart with ears and I can still hold the line. I don't agree with it. I don't agree that this is the choice you're making with your life, but I get it. And both are allowed to happen. It's not either or, it's both and, right? And so we just want to normalize substances. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jack. And thanks for letting me interject that, because it is, to me, the core foundational principle, one of them, of doing grief work, especially with substances, is that we don't have to say what you did, your use, or the things you did to perpetuate it, are something that we think are okay. It's something that you or your loved one likely doesn't think is okay either, and they're the one using the substances. Okay. And so we need to remember that it is a both and. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah. You know, and I've always am mindful of, the more I do this work, especially when we start to get to that moderate to severe substance use disorder, I've never met an individual that was okay. There was a part of them that's okay with their substance use, but a part of them that wasn't. And I call that there's a torment and an anguish that is experienced within the user themselves, right? And they're coping with that anguish through substance use. So we could spend so much time on the experience of the user and the experience of the family member, observing that torment, observing. In the book, Beautiful Boy, I got to talk with David Sheff, the author of that, and he talked about the minute as a father, he understood his son wasn't using to punish them and to throw his own life away. His son was using to cope with the torment that his son was experiencing. He said it unlocked that empathy piece he was missing for a long time. So to kind of transition a little bit back to the intersection of the substance use and grief, right? Loss, when it is related to substance use and addiction, has unique circumstances that are often not discussed, but rather felt and experienced. What we're going to talk about a little bit is stigma that is around when we lose somebody as a result of substance use. And what we see as stigma is a very isolating thing. The non-communication of these losses equals isolation, right? I lost somebody that I loved and I cared about, and I got to see their entirety, right? It's not that bedevilment or enshrinement, that I did get to witness that beautiful, smart, intelligent, caring, compassionate, unique, odd at times, funky, spunky artist, or scientist, or whoever I experienced in my life who also used substances. Substance use was a way that they coped with the world, right? I felt and experienced the entirety of their being missing from my life. I didn't just miss the part of them that used substances that other people, I think, or actually might be talking about them, right? I'm missing that entire person. And I don't feel permission to communicate about that because of the substance use piece, right? So I kind of just, again, more of a self-reflection idea of like, think of your life. And who in this webinar has had a loved one die from what is, we would consider a normal loss, right? And I want you to think about, how did you talk about this loss with others? How did you share about this loss? We're currently going through an end of life moment with my grandmother, right? It's actually I was very open conversation. We got daily check-ins. What's going on? How are things going? I'll go see her later today, right? It's very open. We talked a lot about how kind of chill end of life is in a normal, kind of sense. There's a lot of serenity around it, right? And how did other people talk about this loss? I'll give just a few seconds. If I could pull up the chat, I'll see if anyone's added anything. I'm sorry, my chat's a little funky today. Oh, here we go. Yeah, I'm not going to share what people are putting in the chat out loud, because I want to respect that they're sending it to our panelists. But there's just some really, really amazing. I will share Becky's. They feel like heroin is their best friend and worst enemy. That is the perfect description of the torment that I think people go through. So I want to kind of go for same questions. If you have lost a loved one through substance use, and we'll also add any mental health related loss, right? Maybe we add death by suicide in there. And also, there are some other kind of mental health pathologies, but how did you talk about it with others, right? Maybe I didn't feel permission to talk about it, right? How did other people talk about this loss with you? Very different if you compare it to the normal loss. And I do use quotations around that, but we do put them in different buckets, right? And there's also you know, I'm always mindful of that word tragedy, right? When Maggie kind of talked about out of order, right? It's shocking, it's quick, it's unexpected. Even if they were using for years, it's unexpected. And one of the really sad features of specifically substance use is that people tend to die very quickly after periods of abstinence and recovery. The amount of people I've worked with where they come in and they say, my loved one was doing amazing. It was the best I'd seen him in years. And one day they relapsed. A lot of times those individuals hadn't used in a long time. They had stopped using 2 bags of dope on the weekend and went back and did 2 bags of dope. Or with the recent, you know, it's not as recent, but with the fentanyl epidemic, you know, they go and they use that 1 bag that they used every time, and it was mostly heroin and a little baking soda cut in there. And they went and did it, and it was a little bit of fentanyl, a little bit of heroin, and their body wasn't built to take that in, right? So again, very tragic. The state of mind is my loved one's in recovery. Now they're dead. So I just want to be mindful, right, of all of these transitions. They're sudden that we're experiencing, especially with mental health. Maggie, do you want to throw something in there?
I wanted to say I am kind of monitoring the chat right now as you're talking, Jack, and we are going to get into some of the what to say, what not to say,
Yep.
How to begin to combat your own fears about speaking about, sharing about, and processing through your own grief and loss. And so we're going to be touching on those, especially within the third part of this,
Yep.
after Jack gets through laying the foundation for that. Okay. And so I wanted to say that. Thanks, Jack.
Thanks, Maggie. So everything that I'm kind of focusing on is the impact of stigma on the loss that you're experiencing in your life, right? And we've talked a lot, we built that foundation of unresolved grief. Stigma is an element, it is one of the reasons why unresolved grief might happen, especially when it comes to substance use loss. The emotions of loss attached to a loved one using substances is unique due to the stigma that is associated with substance use disorder. I do also, the purpose of this webinar is for substance use, but if there's another mental health reason that brought you here, it still exists, right? We're talking about the same thing. You can just take out substance use and plug in whatever else you need to in there. Stigma has a very tangible effect on us and modifies our behaviors. And we can think about our behaviors, how we talk about an event or person, place, or thing, who I share this information with, how I feel about a situation. Go back to the compare and contrast between the normal loss, the loss that wasn't shrouded in stigma, and the loss that has stigma. It changes how you're going to approach that. There is a wonderful research that just came out. I pulled a little bit from here, and I didn't get as much in here as I wanted to from this article, but it was focused specifically on stigma and substance use and how much of an impact it has on users themselves and the family system around there. And really what it does is it puts everybody in silos. It isolates everybody. It isolates within family systems and between families to their communities, right? It keeps you kind of in a vacuum. And that's done through behavior change, right? And I think about kind of this last question, like, how did you talk about your loved one while using? While they were still using and using substances, how did you talk about them and how did you talk to them? And, you know, are you still comfortable with sharing? Do you feel comfortable with sharing to people about what your loved one went through? I can tell you, I'm only comfortable with some of the losses, and some of them, when I was still using, were really difficult and are still difficult to talk about. I still feel some of that shame. Nowadays, as being a person in long-term recovery and still losing people around me, which still happens, I'm much more comfortable around it because I'm comfortable with my own identity. That's my own healing journey though, right? It takes a process about becoming very comfortable with sharing that my loved one was a beautiful soul and he chose to use heroin and died as a result of it. And I miss him every day. That's a really difficult statement to share. There's a lot of acceptance and understanding and empathy and compassion that has to come to yourself, as well as to their life and their narrative of the story that they went through. And I do know this is heavy. I always want to be mindful. If you find yourself holding your breath, yep. If you find that tension in your jaws, just massage a little bit. Yep. You know, maybe play with your ears. I know for me, I kind of like to do, we call these progressive muscle relaxations, tense up a little bit, but you also get to let it go. So do that if you need to for a second. So think about stigma. How do these words just make you feel? Each time one of those words come up, for whatever reason, it does something to me, right? The only one that didn't for me was alcohol. When I see alcohol, there's kind of a neutrality, you know, alcohol, it is. But all the others, these are all words that I have actually written down from my work on a helpline. And these are all words that people have either described themselves as, or other families have described themselves, or for some families, their loved one, right? Because those are the words that are given to us when we talk about substance use disorder. We're not given words to talk about it with compassion. Very seldomly are we given words that are meaningful, that are hopeful, that are encouraging. We're given these words about what your loved one's is. And that's where stigma comes in, because you start to believe these words. You start to believe that these are the truth about your loved one. And it takes away from the entirety of their being. It takes away from how amazing, how beautiful, how kind, how compassionate, how smart, how intelligent, how nurturing, the father, all the roles of their life. These words take away from those parts. Don't let anybody take away from who your loved one is. Don't let anyone take away from all those other parts of your loved one's life. I'm always very mindful of the words that we use to describe the experiences that we had. So, kind of last little self-reflection exercise. I do encourage you to share, you know, words in the chat. This doesn't have to just be about a loss, right? Maggie talked a lot of grief work is about the living, right? If you are okay, if you don't mind maybe sharing and describing your loved one in their entirety, right? Maybe try and give like 5 description words of somebody you love and care about in their entirety, right? We're not trying to do bedevilment or enshrinement, just 5 description. If you want to do more, that's great, of somebody that you care about. If it is somebody that you've lost, that's a growth area, and that can be hard to do. If it's somebody that's still here, feel free to put it in the chat, and I will pull up the chat and see. And I'll do one myself. Let me see if I can get my. I'm sitting here looking at some of these, and I think for most of us, I guess some are able to share fully, but some have only sent to us. And thank you. And as I look through these, right, to talk about somebody in their entirety, are people simple? Are they one-dimensional? Absolutely not. Was everything you said or thought of positive? No. Was it all negative? Certainly not, right? Can you sum them up in 1 or 2 words? I challenge you to 5, and I bet you could submit me paragraphs, dissertations on your loved one. Why I love family work and couples work and family work with substance use is because we know each other. We keep each other honest, right? I'll meet with an individual and they'll give me their sob story, and then I'll sit down with their partner, their life partner. You're like, get that BS out of your mouth. Yeah, I mean, some of that's true, but you forgot half the story. because being able to experience each other's worlds, we get to see the whole story, right? We get to share in that. People are very complex. They are, and that's okay. We're full of conflicted emotions and conflict and turmoil and just some beautiful aspects of each individual. I'm a very kind of strengths-oriented individual anyway, and every person comes with a tremendous amount of strengths and growth areas. That's who we are as people, and that's the people that we witness, that we care about. Combating stigma, this is what we're doing, right? When we talk about describing our loved one, we're keeping the entirety of their being at the forefront of our minds. We're keeping the story of who our loved one is. The story is not, I love somebody and they used heroin and they died. That is a simple story that takes away so much of their life. The story is very complex, right? My friend Kyle, who died of a heroin overdose, he had the greatest beard I have ever seen. I still aspire. I'm just trying to live in his shadow with my own beard, right? He was one of the goofiest bastards I've ever met. There's no other way to like really describe Kyle, right? He was goofy, but he was crass. He had just really terrible tattoos and he was proud of them. I mean, he had like tattoos just everywhere, right? And he also was very compassionate. And I saw him just love and give that compassion and kindness. He had 3 years of recovery and shot dope one day as a result of a breakup, and he died. That doesn't make Kyle a weak individual. In fact, he was very brave, you know? Empathy, understanding Kyle's story, understanding his nuance, understanding his subtleties. Empathy is our best tool to combating stigma. And people are complex. They just are, right? It makes it hard. I think sometimes people want, you know, that nice story, just kind of that one-sided story. It makes sense in our brains, right? But have you ever read like a really good biography? Autobiographies aren't great because people tend to give you the one-sided story of what they want you to see. But like a good biography shares the complexity of a person, the torment of them. And behaviors do make sense, even with all the cost of substance use, even for Kyle, the cost of his life. Of course, he went back to a tool that has worked for him in stressful situations. When he felt like he didn't have a whole lot going on for him and the severed relationship of a 4-year relationship, and his roommate and him were kind of at odds, and he wasn't that close with his family at the time. He had kind of withdrawn from life. Of course, it made sense to go back to the tool that brought him safety and security and trust and warmth, right? Behaviors make sense, even with the cost of life. And lastly, kind of where we started, understanding does not equal condoning, but it helps us with empathy, right? I don't agree, and I wish Kyle would have called me, damn it, right? But I get it. So let's talk about the roller coaster ride. And I think I'm going to just check kind of where we're at, make sure we got a few more slides, and then we'll take another break here.
I think we're doing pretty good time-wise, Jack.
Yep.
I think we're on target. Okay.
Cool. Awesome. So roller coaster ride, many losses, right? We kind of talked about the roller coaster ride of emotions earlier. Hope, starting a new treatment program, completed a treatment program, came home sober, clean, not high one night, right? I was working with a psychologist. He talked about like micro changes and macro changes. Sometimes we hope a lot for the macro changes, but what about those micro changes? Like I saw him and he had clear eyes for the first time in a long time. That's a micro change. Only you get to see that, right? They say they want to change. We know that dialogue and conversations is one of the most important aspects of the change process. For the first time, I heard my loved one talk about not the part of them that just loves substance use, but they said, I just feel like I'm losing a lot of relationships in my life because I keep getting high. You know, I maybe I need to stop. Hope, right? Start counseling. Maybe it's a new counselor. They've been with the old one for a while. They just feel like it's not that effective. Starting a relationship that seems healthy. On the other side, let's look at all the loss, the inverse of all those moments, right? Loved one left a treatment program early. see them using again, find drug-related materials, maybe in their bedroom, old friends, goes back to, starts re-engaging in an unhealthy relationship. Why do they keep going back to that same person? I know that all they're doing is getting high, right? Why do they keep going back to the relationship? It's another one of those laws that reinforces the narrative of substance use. They didn't return home. Car smells like marijuana again. We're right back where we started. Finding lighters and spoons, right? The roller coaster ride, there's many losses in that journey of hope and loss and hope and loss. And that's where we start to see, how are we attending to each of these losses? How are we tending to the complex story that is substance use in the relationship with my complex loved one? Do any of you relate to any of these, and can you add to this list? Yeah, I'll just kind of let that breathe for, I know I had raise hand or type in chat. We're not going to do the raise hand, but if you do have any that you wanted to add, hope or loss that you experienced, feel free to add in the chat. There's some good stuff happening in the chat today. So I want to kind of focus on just some of the specific types of losses we see for substance use. We see some of these losses also with our military families, and also PTSD and trauma. But really PTSD, trauma, military families, and mental health and substance use. These types of losses are very kind of unique to these areas. So, anticipatory grief. My loved one is alive and I have lost them, right? My loved one, I can either touch them, smell them, right? I worked with a guy, he had missed his wife for like 3 weeks, and he said, I'm about to go see my wife and I'm gonna go and rub her hair and smell her hair. I thought that was one of the most intimate, wonderful ways of expressing affection. I might be able to do that with my loved one. They're alive, but I have lost them. I find this to be particularly true with my opiate individuals, right? Is that they keep using opiates and I feel like they are so distant from me, but I can still see them. Anticipatory grief is about the flipping, is that at any time I know that I am going to lose them, could lose them. Again, with opiates, we know could happen like that. There's an active grieving process, then I see them later in the day. I'm grieving and I see them. I see them, they go, and I start grieving again. Anticipatory grief. It's a torment that we experience, right? And then we'll also name ambiguous loss, grieving them while they're still alive, right? So there's two types of ambiguous loss. We have psychological loss. My loved one is physically present, but they are mentally absent. We also can see this with cognitive disorders too, right? As individuals grow older, right? And there's the various types of dementia can be present. I can go and hug them and I can grab them, but mentally they are gone. Substance use is the same way, especially when we start talking about severe substance use. They are so focused and that midbrain is so hijacked that I know my loved one's here and I went and had dinner with them last night, but that's not the person that I love and care about. They're just not there right now. Physiological loss is my loved one is missing, but I still have contact with them, or they have not been, it's not been confirmed that they are dead. In my work, I work with a lot of individuals who are been in this process a long time, and they might have not had contact with their loved one for 2, 3, 5 years, right? But they also don't have confirmation that they're not here, right? Or they'll get little pockets of info every 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, that maybe it's a Facebook message, right? I'm still getting confirmation that they're alive, but I don't have the ability to go and smell, be with them, be present with them. And as we talk about unresolved grief, these are the epitome of unresolved. How can I give myself permission to complete that loss, right? To really start showing up and tending to what I've lost, because I can't get a clear answer. These are really complex forms of loss and grief that we exhibit. And it's hard to know. At any time I could be in that anticipatory grief, or at any time I'm kind of back in that psychological loss and I'm trying to bring them back. So I'm actively in the struggle and I'm not giving myself permission to tend to my emotions during that time. So these are really kind of the unique features that when we think about substance use grief. Lastly, my loved one does not communicate with me currently and I'm not in touch with them. Sometimes if we've been in this process for a really long time, there might be that 5-year gap I haven't heard. That's true disconnection in a relationship. A loss, nonetheless, but these types of disconnection are really hard to work through, right? Because we really evaluate our own behaviors in that. And so just being mindful, these are all those unresolved griefs or losses that we can have specifically to substance use. So I know we're kind of wrapping up here. I think we have 2 more slides. My inner dialogue. What is it I'm saying to myself, right? I said I'm really kind of focused on like behaviors and cognition, and let's look at just your thoughts. And my Bluetooth, can you still hear me? Okay, cool. I just ask you to be curious about your thoughts for once, right? Instead of being so kind of enmeshed in them, just almost look at them like you're an observer, right? What am I saying to myself? Do I blame myself? Is it my fault? I might be telling myself I should have done more. I would have done more if I knew. I would have done more if Kyle had, if only I'd picked up on those signs faster. I could have addressed this. I could have better addressed this, right? I wish I shared with them that they meant the world to me. I wish I had shared with them something different. I wish I'd shared with them more about how I felt with them, right? We develop beliefs based on events and turn them into the story about who we are. Again, we do that with that stigma piece, right? People say that person used heroin, or I know that they were hanging out with a rough crowd, therefore they're a drug user. I just created a story about somebody. That's not the real story, though. We know the real story, right? We have to challenge ourselves to talk about our own complex story. Is that I tried certain things that I didn't know, and I was doing the best I could, and maybe I was going through my own divorce at the time my loved one was using, and I didn't have the emotional bandwidth to show up, and I would have done more, but I didn't know what else I could have done at the time. At the time, I had a limited information. I didn't know about Not One More Alabama or the drug education counselor. I didn't know that there was resources. I didn't know I could go down to the Addiction Prevention Coalition and talk. I didn't know. We have to give ourselves the ability to have the full story. We have to challenge our thoughts, challenge our beliefs, and beliefs are not facts. They're the stories we tell ourselves about who we think we are based on a limited set of evidence. Put it all out there. That's kind of my challenge for you today. If you're holding some of those thoughts, put it all out there. We'll close with this slide, and then we're going to take a few breaths before we wrap up. My unresolved grief. What do I wish was different about the relationship with my loved one? What do I wish was better about the relationship with my loved one? And am I being 100% honest in myself about how I think, feel, and share? I really focus on that share piece about my loved one, right? Glorifying, kind of going back, right? Glorifying, demonizing. Am I making their story all about substance use, or am I making my story all about the things that they did perfect and right? Am I being 100% honest with that person? What are those messages or communications I didn't get to say? What rituals, artwork, writing, acts of service have I done to honor all the emotions? Not part of those emotions, all the emotions, how I feel. And then lastly, answering the above questions can give us insight into how I'm recovering in my own grief and how I'm experiencing my loss as a person. These are really complex losses. If you're here today, I know that you're going through some type of complex loss or complex emotion about a loved one. So I know there's a lot. I'm going to challenge you all to kind of just think about some of those thoughts. Be curious about how you're feeling about this in this moment. I know this was a very heavy hour, and I'm going to take a deep breath because I need it, and maybe you'll join me in doing so.
My friends, This is deep and difficult knowing of ourselves and of our loved ones. And so we're going to address some of the things that we can do about that within this next segment. So let's go ahead. Let's take 15 minutes. Let's be back on here at 11:15. I'm going to talk briefly about that, and then Jack and I will be able to open up and answer any of the questions that are still lingering or comments anybody wants to make about things. So we'll see you back here at 11:15. Thank you. Hey, you guys. It is 11:15, and so I wanted to go ahead and get us back started so that we do have time to be able to discuss things at the end of this seminar together. And so what do we do or not do? And so I want to first go to the ineffective coping. And so John James and Russell Friedman call these STIRBs, short-term energy relieving behaviors. And in and again, they're not bad in and of themselves. It is if we begin to use them over and over again in the place of the expression of our thoughts, feelings, emotions that we're having on that roller coaster. And so alcohol or different forms of substance use, using food, shopping, exercise, excessive internet use has become a huge one. For a lot of younger people, and I would say truthfully 40 and under, gaming is a huge escape for people in dealing with life and relationships. For many of us, Instagram, now TikTok, Facebook, social media, period, has caused us to go into this fantastical place where we just escape for too long and ignore our own internal voice that's saying, hey, I need you to take a look at me. We got some stuff going on in here. Excessive reading, again, going into the fantastical and the separation of the self. Now, often when I'm teaching this, and I'm teaching it to people who are addicted to substances, I laugh and I call them LTERBs. They're long-term energy relieving behaviors. See, but they become bondage because when someone has a dependency on a substance, that short-term energy relieving behavior becomes the long-term energy relieving behavior because of how the chemicals start to kick within the brain. And then it actually causes its own grief process because of how everything Jack just talked about comes about. So I often teach my people that they have LTERBs, not STIRBs, okay? The next slide we've got is the most common misinformation about grief, okay? And we lump that, all of the statements that people hear and the way that we cope, into 6 different basically myths, okay? Time heals all wounds. You hear that all the time from people everywhere. Just give it time. Time is going to take care of that. We just need to walk through this day and let it happen. Time is a big component of dealing with grief, but it's not time chronologically in and of itself. It's actually what we do within that time period that makes the difference. So again, if I'm stuck with my STIRBs and I use those too much, time's not going to make any difference at all about me dealing with my grief process. Grieving alone. For many of us, the phrase "suck it up" was used. I know that it was used with me. I laugh about this a lot, but I grew up in a neighborhood full of all boys, and I was taught to suck it up and be a man. I was told that. How confusing is that? I'm a girl, first and foremost, and then I was just supposed to suck up everything that I was feeling, act like it didn't happen, and go along with my life. I do remember being a kid, and I've talked about all this stuff with my parents. So I'm not saying anything they don't know. The first loss that I really had in my life was a kitten. And Jack may remember this story. I tell it because I think it's important, because it's what I was really taught and what I internalized again in my child brain, the rigidity of my child brain. My dad's good friend had a really, really long brown Ford, and it was parked in our driveway. And we had outdoor cats, and one of them had a litter of kittens. And one of those kittens' names was Boots. He was black with little white feet, so those were his boots. And we didn't know, but he had crawled into the wheel well of this friend's car. And so when he left, we're standing out on the porch waving, and he backs up and he backed over my cat in front of me and my parents were there. And I don't recall my mom being outside, but I do recall me and my dad being outside. And so what happened with that is I began crying because there my cat is dead. JW stopped the car because he sees me crying. And then my dad comes over, pats me on the shoulder, okay, and says he didn't mean to do it. Goes over and picks up the cat and flings the cat like a frisbee into the woods across the street to get it out of my face, okay? So I'm not looking at it. And he comes over again, taps me, because that's my dad's, I call it the Maxie 2-pat, actually, taps me on the shoulder like that because that's his form of a hug, and told me he didn't mean to do it. And we have all these other kittens, and why don't I go ahead and go to my room until I feel better and then come on out. And he knew I was upset. He didn't intend to harm me. I also now as an adult know he did the best he could. He was getting that out of my face. He was trying to deal with his friend who ran over my cat and was upset because he would never harm a fly. And just hurt me tremendously and didn't mean to. And so what my little child brain, though, interpreted from that was, I'm not supposed to feel bad because he didn't intend to hurt me. I've got all these other cats, so replacing the loss means I shouldn't feel bad about it because I just get another one. I'll focus on the new one that I get or another thing that I have. And then grieve alone. Go to my room until I feel better and work it out by myself with my own inner wisdom that I had at a young age of 4. And then come back out when I feel better. And so many of us have stories like that we don't even realize have been fundamental in implanting these ideas and these myths culturally that we have within this country of dealing with loss, okay? Be strong. And a lot of times we say, be strong for others. I've got to be strong for my dad. I've got to be strong for my mom. I've got to be strong for my brother, my sister. I've got to be strong for my husband. I've got to be strong for my other kids. There's all these people I've got to be strong for. I've got to push through this because I've got to get all this stuff done. I'm just going to be strong, and I'm going to be strong, and I'm going to swallow this down, and I'm going to push myself through this because I can take it. I am tough, and I am going to handle it all. And we push our way through, and we do not acknowledge everything else. And people say to us, oh my God, you're so strong. I don't know how you're going through this the way you are. We're so proud of you. And they give you kudos for doing these things. And so you continue those behaviors, and you also think, whew, I can't let them know this is a front because they're proud of me for acting like this. And that goes into, and these all spin into each other, you guys. That goes into don't feel bad. Well, nobody intended to hurt you. They didn't intend to do this. We didn't intend to lie to you about what was going to happen when we moved, but we don't want you to feel bad about it, though. And we don't want for you to feel bad that your grandmother died, Jack, because she had a long, good life. Let me tell you something. My grandmother died of a massive heart attack at 84, and I can feel bad about it because you know what? I was robbed of having her at my wedding. I was robbed of her seeing my grandchildren, her grandchildren in person when my kids were born. And I have to tell you, every time some major event happens in my life, I feel bad that my mama is not there to see it because she was extremely instrumental in my life. I can feel bad about it, even though she lived a long life. She lived an awesome life, very full of love and fun and loss and hurt and pain and all of that all mixed in. And she weathered it and lived to be 84 years old and spunky and fun till the end. I still can feel bad about it. Replace the loss. Again, the kitten story. I got all these other kittens. you know? The worst thing I have ever heard is when people have miscarriages and people come up to them, or stillbirths, or they lose infants or young children, and people say, thank God you can have other ones. It never, ever, ever is appropriate to say that to anybody. We need to honor what is happening in the time period. We need to honor what's happening in the time period. And some of us, and I'm telling you, I have done every one of the things that I'm going to talk about in a minute, acting, thinking I'm doing the right thing, okay? So please don't be harsh with yourself. Look at yourself with loving kindness and begin to wrap yourself around new language, new expression, new abilities of awareness to recognize these things. You know, when I break something, I go out and buy another one immediately. Okay. But there are some things in life that are irreplaceable. I had this gorgeous glass ornament that I loved, and my son broke it. And there are no more that I can find. And I loved it. He didn't mean to break it, but I can't replace it. And it was precious to me. And I did grieve that, and I do. And so when Christmas comes, I grieve that. I can't replace it. Keep busy. This, to me, is our society to a T. I call it the 3 up, 3 down rule, especially for white communities. We are literally expected to have 3 days of people being dead, and then 3 days, you know, after those 3 days, we're supposed to bury those people and or scatter their ashes, whatever, and have the funeral service and memorial or whatever you want to call it. And then the next day we're going back to work. And bereavement time in this country is disgusting to me. We have no longer, within just the general American culture, we do not have long periods of grief like many other cultures do, where you will see people wearing black if they lost their spouse for a year. You will have periods of weeks that different things are occurring to honor people's lives and to take care of the living, okay? Because grief is about who is present. Please know that grieving is about who is present. It is your stuff, okay? We honor the entire relationship of what is lost, but the grief is yours, and we need to honor the person in front of us, okay? Keeping busy is just the workaholic mentality, the addictive busyness that we have built into us culturally just to keep us going. It's like we're a hamster on a wheel, and we just go, 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 go. Because if we stop, whew, reality hits. Reality hits. Okay? And we've got to remember that. So those myths are strong. Jack, that next slide, will you just throw all those up? I have heard and seen a lot of these. You guys have too. And some of you have even said them in this chat. You'll be fine in time. I know how you feel. Well, you shouldn't be feeling that way still. They've been dead for 5 years. Look at the bright side. At least they're in a better place. Don't feel bad. The suffering's over now. Don't be angry with God. God is sovereign. God's will. You're young. You can still have other children. It was just a dog. It was just a cat. It's just a bird. You guys, one of the biggest issues that happens is when we go in and we say to someone, I know how you feel. We try to do that to express empathy. What happens is we do what I call flip the script. We make it about us and our story to try and alleviate the pain of others instead of saying, I can only imagine how this must be for you, and I'm here. Or I'm here. Or nothing. Some people are huggers. They just need presence. They need somebody to hold their hand. Part of the grief process, again, is everyone's loss is individualized and unique, and every relationship is unique. Jack and I, like I said, we both still have our parents. They're awesome. We were raised in pretty much nuclear family units, which is rare in today's day and age with the age that we are. And I'm a little bit older than Jack. Shh, don't tell. And so it is rare. Okay. But just because that's true and we have some similarities, Jack's relationship with Patty and my relationship with my mother are totally different. And so if I said, Jack, I know exactly how you feel when something's going on with Patty, that makes no sense. It makes no sense, and it flips it and makes it more about me. Okay, so just remember. The other thing is we get a lot of religious comments when people die. And unless you really know that person and their belief structure, we don't need to be saying things like that at the immediate time of death in an acute situation. Because the truth is, again, grief is about the living. As far as we know, the dead don't grieve. I may learn that at a different point in time after I am no longer in the physical realm. But as far as we know, grief is for the living. And so I don't want them to be in a better place. I want them with me. I can be angry with God because I was robbed. I was robbed of watching my kid get married. I was robbed of being a grandmother. I was robbed. I was robbed. And I can be mad with God. The God of my understanding is big enough for me to be mad as hell and understand it and love me and hear me and see me. And I also know for many people who do struggle with infertility, that long process is so hard. And many times, also people who choose not to physically have children, because there are a lot of people who do. They just choose not to have children for multiple different reasons. It could be physiologic, it could be emotional, it could be genetics, it could just be they don't want to parent. And that's okay. They have what I call their fur babies. That is that's their child. I know many people who at the death of a dog grieve more than they do with a parent, because the dog sleeps with them every day. The dog sits in their lap. The dog or the cat is the symbol. Mostly the dog, though, I have to tell you. Sometimes the cats, they're just too finicky. They're going to do what they want to do when they want to do it. My cat never met me at the door, but both of my dogs do. I've never known my dog not to be happy when I came home. Isn't that beautiful? And when that's not there, it's a hole. So I say to you, the relationship itself is what's important, and honoring it fully. Jack, if you'll go on to that next slide about actions to take, if you'll throw all of that up there. So what helps us identify what's been unresolved is looking at the questions of what could have, should have, would have been different, better, or more. Different, better, or more. Okay. And let me give an example about that. I already spoke about my grandmother, so I'll use that. I wish my grandmother would not have been alone when she died. I wish my grandmother would have acted better in the last couple of months of her life because she became kind of negative. She was struggling with breathing. She wasn't getting enough oxygen to her brain, and that increases irritability and negativism. And so she would get snippy. She would get mad at my father. I witnessed that a few times, and it was difficult. I wish that she had acted better towards my father. I wish I had more time with her. I wish I had more time with her, and I'm always going to wish I had more time with her here. Her stories, her life, her laugh was infectious. That gorgeous fiery red hair she had, I wish that more people in our family had it. She hated it because she was made fun of for it. And I wish that I had that hair, and every female in our family does. The only person that has it is my nephew, my brother's son, and it is absolutely gorgeous, and we're all jealous. I wish I'd stayed with her more. I wish I'd visited her more when I went to see my parents, because she lived down the street and I would drive past her house and not stop. So that's some of that kind of stuff. Okay. And that's in my relationship with an 84-year-old woman. Okay. Whom I had a lot of time with before she passed, because she did live down the street from me throughout my life. For those of us who didn't have the opportunity to say things we needed to say, to do things we needed and wanted to do, those lists are going to be extensive, and that is okay. We need to dialogue with ourselves, and it helps to put down on paper what was positive from our perspective in a relationship, what was negative from our perspective within the relationship, because this helps us see holistically the relationship. We tend to focus on one side or the other. Or for many of us, if there is a tragic death, if somebody suicided, if somebody died as a result of overdose, that becomes the focus. And so that one negative memory overcrowds and overshadows all this other stuff for a really long time. And friends, please hear me. It is a horrific thing. But we have forgotten and not allowed ourselves to experience every other piece of the relationship when we just sit with that one. There's so much more. The other thing is this is what you view as positive and you view as negative. I've had many people who lost their friends, and their positive interactions with them were all related around substance use. And y'all, they need to put that on the positive side of their graph, because that's the connection. That's how they bonded. I've got a lot of people who smoked pot, who tripped on acid and laid out in the field and discussed all the things of the world and pontificated, and and it was a huge experience for them, and it was very positive. They see the negative piece of, we use substances together, but they also see the positive piece of, we use substances together, and this is what happened as a result. And I am not allowed to tell you what's positive and negative in your life. If I do, your grief will remain unresolved, because it's not your truth. What happens in grief work is you get your story straight for you. Your authentic truth about this relationship comes out and is fully honored. A lot of times a letter helps. Writing out what you apologize for within the relationship. But also, you guys, we have got to forgive people. Again, forgive does not equal condone. If I have been abused, that will never, ever, ever be okay. Those actions will never be okay. But I've chosen to forgive my abuser. because I'm the one who continues the harm. My abuser's off doing whatever in the world they want to. I don't even know if I ever crossed their mind. I'm bringing harm on myself by rehearsing my trauma and tragedy and by allowing that to block me from fully living my life. And so there are ways to address those kinds of things therapeutically. You can do multiple different therapeutic techniques to help you with specific images of deaths, specific images of finding people within overdose, seeing people in hospital with tubes, multiple different images that we may have in our minds about these kinds of relationships. Maybe you were beat up severely. There's a lot of different things that happen, okay, in regard to substance use and that surround substance use. We must get to a place where we can fully remember and release it. One of my favorite definitions for me is that I'm going to allow myself to fully remember, and I'm going to give it to God, because I can't fix it. I can't heal myself on my own, but I can allow it to be true and come up and out and give it to God for God to handle. Apologies are for what I did or did not do, what I said or did not say. Many of us who have struggled with an addicted loved one have taken on responsibility of explaining away their behavior and choices to others. That is not what this is about. If you're apologizing for somebody else's behavior, I'm sorry you did this, I'm sorry you said that, you actually need to issue a forgiveness statement, because that was their behavior. It needs to be, I forgive you for this. I apologize for not allowing you to accept responsibility for it while you were alive. I forgive you for dying. I forgive you for leaving me. I forgive you for getting hijacked internally and not being you anymore. I forgive you for running away from treatment and leaving AMA. I forgive you, against medical advice. Sorry, I speak in terminology a lot. I forgive you for not following through with what you said you would do while you were in treatment. I forgive you. I forgive you. There is power also within speaking things out loud. In a very practical sense, we do release to a larger, higher power, because the atmosphere itself is bigger than all of us. And so find a non-judgmental listener. Write your story out. Share it. Begin to make art pieces, or just let yourself begin to express emotionally. And sometimes we can do those things when we cannot find words. You guys, it is okay to not be able to verbalize your soul connections with people. Sometimes there are no words. And we need to remember that. What about help for grievers? I want to go ahead and move along. I know we're getting close on time. I'm looking at the clock. Again, I could teach for forever. I understand it. All right, Jack, go on with the help for grievers, and we're going to go straight to Elizabeth. Thank you. She wrote on death and dying, on grief and grieving, and those 5 stages that we talked about, okay? And so you can look at her work. It's actually extremely helpful. It is phenomenal. On Grief and Grieving is awesome. I own all her stuff. I like it. It's good. The next thing is the grief recovery method, which we've mentioned multiple times. And the grief recovery method is from the Grief Recovery Institute, which Jack and I are both certified through. And Jack, I believe you're supposed to be talking right now instead of me, so have at it.
Oh, no, you're going through. I'm up in
Okay.
like 3 more slides. You good?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Angie Miller she writes The Becoming Place, and grief has a way of unsettling everyone in its proximity. Grievers need their closest loved ones more. Grievers want and need to be heard, not fixed. This is huge, and her definition of loss is one of my favorites: loneliness beyond words. She has a blog that is so good, and it is for people who have lost kids, okay, in multiple different ways. All right. And then the last one is Megan Devine, and she wrote It's Okay to Not Be Okay. And I will tell you guys, to me, it's the best grief book that I have read in the past decade. She just devotes the entire book to helping the griever effectively cope. And within that book, there is a section for people surrounding the griever and what helps and what doesn't. She lost her fiance tragically in an accident, and it is just a phenomenal book. And then she has a definition of recovery from loss that is just beautiful. And Jack, did you want to share that with us?
You're up on this one. I've got the next one. Yep.
Okay. Recovery and grief is not about moving on. It's about resilience or a return to normal life. It's not about that. Recovery is about listening to your own wounds. Recovery is about being honest about the state of your own devastation. It's about cultivating patience, not the kind that implies waiting it out until you return to normal, but patience in knowing that grief and loss will carve their way through you, changing you. And when I see that in my mind, I literally see the Grand Canyon, where the Colorado over millennia now has carved its way through and changed the environment. Grief and loss will carve their way through you, changing you, making their own kind of beauty in their own ways. If we talk about recovery from loss as a process of integration, of living alongside grief instead of overcoming it, then we can begin to talk about what might help you survive. Given what cannot be restored, what cannot be made right, how do we live life here? That's the real work of grief recovery. Finding ways to live alongside your loss and building life around the edges of what will always be a vacancy. Jack, go ahead.
Yeah, I love this one. I wanted to read this one because I think there's
It's my
wonderful
favorite.
parallel. I mean, right. And I love the parallels to substance use recovery as well as grief recovery. So recovery means feeling better. Recovery means claiming your circumstances instead of your circumstances claiming you and your happiness. Recovery is finding new meaning for living without the fear of being hurt again. Recovery is being able to enjoy fond memories without having them precipitate painful feelings of regret or remorse. It wasn't all bad. It wasn't all good, right? Recovery is acknowledging that it is perfectly all right to feel sad from time to time and to talk about those feelings no matter how those around you react. Freedom to express what you need. Recovery is being able to forgive others when they say or do things that you know are based on their lack of knowledge about grief. Recovery is one day realizing that your ability to talk about the loss you've experienced is indeed normal and healthy, not a pathological process.
Yes, absolutely. And so this is my favorite definition of courage, and I use it multiple times within the grief intensive. Real courage is owning up to the fact that we face a terrifying task, admitting that we are appropriately frightened, identifying sources of strength both outside and within ourselves, and then going ahead and doing what needs to be done. My friends, we are going to put up some resources for you that Jack has added, and they've been adding a bunch of things within the chat. I believe right now would be a good time for any kind of specific questions or comments. So Patty and Carrie, I believe you guys, Carrie, you were going to moderate for us a little bit and see what we needed to address a little bit more, if anything.
Yes. So really, y'all have answered most of everything that has come up. You did say that you would share the PowerPoint. Is that true? Can you?
Yes, we can. Jack, would you put that in a PDF and
Yep.
send it to, yeah, and change the header footer in it, please, before you do that.
I got you. Yeah.
Thank you.
And then Patty, can you send that out to everybody that's signed in?
I sure will. I will send that out to everybody that registered on Eventbrite. So if you are on here and you did not actually register with Eventbrite, then I will not have your email address. So please just email me at mail@notonemorealabama.org, and I will make sure that you get that. But I won't have your email address if you did not get registered through Eventbrite. And some of you may not have actually registered yourself. Some of them may have been registered by me, but you would have received at least an email which would tell you that you're registered. So if you haven't gotten an email from us giving you like the link and things to today's website or webinar, then please email me directly at mail@notonemorealabama.org so I know you're here.
Within the chat, there was a question about information for children. So on the Grief Recovery Institute webpage, there is a book called Helping Children Grieve. It is really phenomenal. There are books that can be purchased. One is by Claudia Black, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name. It is in my office. It is purple and it's sitting on the table. I see it all the time. But it is for children specifically to work through having a parent who is struggling with substance use issues. And then also there is a graphic novel out called Hey Kiddo, and it is phenomenal for teens and young adults actually to read and work through somebody losing a parent to the disease of addiction. And it is just so good. My husband is a children's and adolescent librarian. He's the one who introduced me to that himself. Met the author. It was wonderful. And so it's a great resource to have. There are and could be groups set up around. There are not really a lot that I know of that specifically do grief work in like this with children. They do it in a different way, which is good and appropriate. The Amelia Center is housed within proximity of Children's Hospital in Birmingham, Alabama, and they have bereavement counseling for children and can probably be the best resource I can think of to point you to different places for adolescents and children.
Maggie, is the Claudia Black's book Children of Denial?
No.
Is it? What about Repeat After Me?
No, this is actually like a workbook where they color and they draw pictures and everything. It's purple. It's bigger. I'm going to have to look it up real quick to find it. I will look in my orders of my Amazon
Is it Nelson's Journey?
Maybe.
That's
Let me look it on up. I will find it for us, okay?
And then a question, basically, you know, this information, as with all kinds of discussions around grief, this gets us stirred up, you know, and so we're in the middle of a pandemic.
Yes.
Which makes it so hard to do grief work, you know, separate from other people. So just whatever y'all can offer, say, encouragement as far as people going further. I know you're giving books. Anything else you want to say towards that?
Jack, go ahead and take that.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to say that this was an educational opportunity, right? And it's the start. And if you were to do the Grief Weekend Intensive, this would be just the very beginning, right? And Maggie talked about those specific steps to take. Really, I mean, I think that the first step would be at this point, if that's where you're kind of at, it's like, I need to start this work. I need to really engage in this. It's either picking up that grief recovery handbook or picking up some of those other resources. the Grief Recovery Handbook is kind of like a manual on how to really do those specific action steps, step by step. And it really also talks to like, who are you going to work with, right? And that doesn't have to be a therapist, but it can be. It might be somebody. Maggie's got something there.
My dad loves me. My dad has a disease.
Good, thank
Got
you.
it.
Absolutely. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful book. Sorry about that, Jack. Wanted to
You're good.
get that up there real quick.
And,
Yep,
and I
you
just
had
want to
it.
say, you know, when we do get to the place that we can be around people again, which please come soon, I can't encourage people enough to get in a grief intensive. I've done one with Maggie, went in intending to do one thing, ended up doing something else, but it was very impactful for me. And it's so hard to make that commitment to say, I'm going to do this and then follow through with it. But man, it's life-giving. So.
Hey, Carrie, are you guys still doing the GRASP support group down there?
We are not.
Okay.
We're not. We're looking for somebody to take it.
Okay. I know we had started a support group up here for a while and just kind of, it didn't quite take off. So we kind of chose a different path with that.
Yeah.
But there is a national organization called GRASP, which is an acronym for,
Oh, grief recovery
Grief.
after substance passing. Is
Yes.
that right?
Yes,
Yep.
yes,
so it's
grasp.
very
Mhm.
specific to this population. And so,
Yeah.
you know, you can keep an eye on their national website. They have a search that you can look for meetings. And right now there aren't any other in Alabama if Carrie's group is not doing that, but at the time, but they're hard. They're hard to keep them going and moving, and people are at very different places in their grief. And so that can be really difficult. I know on the Not One More Alabama. Oh, thank you, Maggie. I appreciate you putting that up.
And y'all just saying, I'm not promoting Amazon, but it's $11.99 right now on sale, and it's good.
Yeah.
Just saying.
I will say if you go to the notonemorealabama.org website, there is a tab for resources. And then if you scroll down to support and then grief support, we have a number of different things on there. There's a couple of online groups in Alabama that are specific to people that have lost loved ones to addiction. So we have one of those on there. I'm not on it myself, and so I can't speak to the quality of it, but I know it's there. And I know that there's other people who have referenced things like that. We have a link to the Psychology Today resource to find a counselor that specializes in grief. And I would imagine, Maggie, I don't want to overstep my boundaries, but if somebody were specifically looking for a counselor, that if they contacted you, maybe you could help them find some resources.
Yes, I would be glad to do that. At this point in time, I have to tell you the truth, my individual caseload is full. And I don't have a group set up right now. It is something that I really want to do. It's something I believe is necessary. But with the type of intimate sharing and bonding that gets done, that's why we're not doing the intensive this time. It's not safe at this time for me to run a grief group, in my opinion. I don't want to harm anyone. So I have several good clinicians that I love dearly and know personally that would be more than happy to help and assist, and are phenomenal grief counselors. And future-wise, be glad to let anybody know when intensives are coming up. I'm praying I can do one maybe in February, but that is still all up in the air, friends. We just don't know how things are going. So there's that.
Is there anything else on there that we need to address? One thing I was going to mention too with the children, and I'm probably speaking a little ahead here, but I know up here in North Alabama, the Children's Advocacy Center received a grant not too long ago to address opioid addiction and children. And I think that they're going to be having some programming. So if you have a child in the North Alabama area, I don't know where they're at in terms of the program development yet, but I know that it's a focus area for them coming up. So there may be some type of resources for children. And there's just not a more incredible group of people out there than the Children's Advocacy Center. So if you just Google them, that's a North Alabama resource.
Okay.
All right.
That's awesome. And I got the PDF. That's what I was working on. So we will
Beautiful.
make sure to get that PowerPoint out to everyone.
Thank you so much, Jack. I really appreciate this from the bottom of my heart, how much you've helped with the tech part of this, but just you bringing yourself to this honors me greatly.
Yeah, Maggie, it's always a pleasure to spend time and do this with you, right? I always consider you to just be someone I really look up to in this field. And I love your energy and kind of just you bringing your spirit to this hour. And thank you all for hosting us, all three of your organizations.
Absolutely.
I'm so floored that you guys provide as much, resources and services and education to the state, right? You've kind of covered the state between the three of you. That's really, really amazing. So thank you all. And lastly, thank you all to all the attendees for this Saturday morning, right? 9 to 12. That's a long time to commit
It's a
to
huge
this work.
chunk.
Yep. Especially around a really tough topic. And so I'm
Yes.
honored that you spend time. I know we had some in the provider role, some in the personal role, and some with a mixture of both. And so thank you for wherever you are and whoever you are. I know I appreciate all of you. Yeah.
I do as well. And it is an honor to work with you three and your organizations. And the work, again, that you do is so necessary and so needed within this state. And my prayer is it becomes a model for other states all around in the Southeast. And then this keeps spreading because we all need it so much. You are integral to what we do.
Thank y'all so much.
Guys,
It's
appreciate
wonderful.
that.
Yeah.
Thanks for everyone for your Saturday morning.
Yep.
Thank you.
Blessings to everyone.
Yeah.
Bless all of you.
And you reach out if you need help.
Absolutely.
Emails, there's resources. You're not alone.
Phone
Don't
a
you remember
friend
that?
today. Phone
Yep.
a friend.
Yep. Phone a
This is
friend
a
today.
phone a friend day.
Yep.
Push the button.
Yep. That's right.
Go watch a movie and curl up in a blanket.
Yeah. That's right.
Thank you,
y'all.
everybody.
You
Thank
guys
you
have
all.
a wonderful day.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.